Mark Carney called a snap election, and now we're in the thick of election campaigning. Let's talk about that.
Arriving at Retrospect. Retrospect Station. Doors will open on the left.
Welcome back, passengers, to Retrospect Station, the show where I show you just how colorful life can be. I'm your host, Elizabeth Dean, and last week we talked about a horse and what me grappling with my mortality in a dark field. But the lesson we learned from that last week was that sometimes there are things that are completely out of your control, and sometimes you do have to face down a danger. You do have to face down an unpleasant situation just because of maybe the choices that you've made or the consequences of actions, yours or others. And sometimes you just can't avoid having to interact with something dangerous or put yourself on the line. And otherwise, sometimes you just have to face what has been thrown at you. And I want to lean into that specifically this week. Specifically, dealing with things that were just thrown at you and how do you handle things on the spot. A lot of us who've worked in customer service or retail know exactly what that means. I've worked in service work and retail work. I've worked in customer service. People have worked in customer service since the dawn of capitalism. And one of the things we know for certain is that the general public is a nightmare to work with. Like, I love y'all. I really do. But as a group, as a demographic of everybody, y'all are a nightmare. Because people just don't really know how things work. And sometimes you wonder, like, how did you get through life to this point? Everybody's got their reasons. But when as a whole, the demographic is, like, not capable of doing some basic things you think they need to do, it gets a little frustrating. And anyone else who's worked in retail or service work or customer service work also knows that common sense is not common. And so I thought I might help a little bit with that this time, specifically with how elections work. I have worked at 3 separate Canadian election events. One of them was federal and 2 of them were Ontario provincial. And at this point, I understand extremely well how things work, at least to an extent. I mean, I don't think I'm as good as a returning officer, but I want to get into this. Like, I want to get into who you see at the poll station, how this is going to work, because we're kind of at a crossroads of what's going to happen to the country, depending on the results of this next election. And that's going to matter for the next 4 years. I will be 30 by the time the next general election needs to come around, assuming that they don't call one before or that something horrible doesn't happen or something like that. The same thing goes for the provincial election where Doug Ford just won a second term, and I'm going to be 30 when he's gone. So whatever's going to happen is going to shape the next 4 years of all of our lives. And I think it matters if you know what to expect. And I want to put this out to encourage as many people to vote as possible. And I want to encourage as many people, and people say don't be partisan. I'm sorry. I am a huge human rights activist and a huge progressive person. When you go to the poll, you need to vote to not sacrifice your neighbors. Your neighbors are your community. Your neighbors are your people. You need to vote in such a way that when you cast a vote, you are not voting for someone to be hurt or murdered or slaughtered or kicked out of the country. You are not voting for human beings to have their human life destroyed. I don't care. I'm sorry. This is not an issue of opinion anymore. This is an issue of human rights and fascism. But I want to get into what to expect at the polls. So I worked at the federal election the federal election polling day location in 2021 in, I think it was November. I have a feeling it was either November or September. I think it was September. I don't remember the day, the month, the year. I remember the year. I remember. But it was, also, if you hear like a weird crunchy noise, I'm wearing a leather jacket, and it's I picked the wrong I picked the wrong outfit to record audio today, but oh well. So how do I even start with this? It was the first time I'd ever worked at an election. It wasn't the first time I'd voted, but it was the first time I'd worked at an election, and the first one was the federal election for me. So this is the one where it was a race between Trudeau and I don't remember. I don't remember. So the first election that I worked at was the federal election of 2021. And one thing to note specifically about federal elections is that there is no technology used for any of the voting process. And this is in comparison to Ontario that does allow electronics to be used. And a part of that is because it's a federal election and it's so much more important, has so much higher stakes in a federal election. So we don't use electronics, given that there's so many ridings, given that there's so many people, given that there's so much stuff concerning a federal election. Everything is done by hand. Everything is done on paper. The ballots are marked on paper. The ballots are manually submitted in a box. The ballots are manually signed by the person who issues them. And the ballots are counted by hand. So many times polling stations are alive and well and awake for an hour, well after the election timing, just to count the ballots. So my first election, we did everything by hand, and everything was kept track of on paper. So there was a thing called a poll book, and in there I had to detail everything that happened that was unusual. I had to detail when I stepped away from my station to take a lunch break or snack break or something, and that when I stepped back, like every single movement is marked. And so just from your perspective as an elector, as someone who votes, but someone who does not work at the polling station, when you walk in, you see a set of different staff. You see someone who seems to be a leader. You see the people who can register you and deal with, oh, my name is spelled incorrectly, or I don't have this ID, but I have this ID and this ID. And they're like, oh, that's not the right address. And so there's the person who will deal with that. And then there is someone who will sign and issue a ballot with their signature on the back of it to make it valid. And then they'll give it to you, fold it up a certain way, and then they'll tell you go behind the screen, and then you vote and you come back to them and you put it in the box in front of them. And then you skedaddle out of there. And then there's a person who is telling people in the hallways or whatever, go here, go there, stand here, wait here, and so on. And they can also answer general questions for, like, do I have the right ID? Do I have this? What if I come back later? How late are you guys open? That kind of stuff. So the way the polling station is set up is there are staff. There is a leader staff. They're called different things, but I think for the federal elections, they're called central poll supervisor. For Ontario elections, they're called supervising deputy returning officer. And then there are even bigger poll employee positions where there's people who observe and supervise multiple poll stations at a time. And a polling station is just where you step in, where you walk your feetsies in to go cast your vote. That place is called a poll station. Sometimes in a huge place, like in a giant gymnasium or in a giant shopping center or something that's set up as a poll station, you could have like 20 desks and 2 of them at a time are each called a poll station or something like that. Like you could have multiple stations in a giant location. That's how that also works. But one of the hallmark traits of elections and how they're run and how a poll station is run and how the election is conducted is truly, at its core, it must be done by the people. So candidates are not allowed to work at poll stations. Candidates' family members and friends are not allowed to work at poll stations. Basically, if you have a personal connection with anyone in politics, you are not allowed to work at a poll station. If you have a general acquaintanceship, potentially you could, but like it can't be something where you would have a personal vested interest in a specific candidate, or in politics in general. So it's very much so election for the people, of the people, by the people. It has to be done by just your regular old citizens and residents. I do believe you can't actually. I want to backtrack on that. Not a resident. I believe you have to be a citizen in order to be a poll official. I don't think you have to be a citizen to be what's called an information officer, but you do have to be a citizen to be what's called a deputy returning officer. So positions, I'll get into that because I just mentioned two important ones. The person who greets you at the door is either called an information assistant or an information officer, depending on if you're dealing with a federal election or Ontario provincial election. Then there is somebody called, in previous years, they used to be called a poll clerk. Recently, they have been called registration officer. And they are just the person who, if you need a name change, or if they're just making sure like you are who you say you are, you're eligible for the ballot and so on, they're the person who checks you off. They tell you, yep, you need this ID and that ID. Let me see it. Check you off. Yep, you're in the system, or you're on the list. Cross you off. Go over to that next table. Get a ballot. Cool. Great. Done. That's called registration officer. In previous years, I remember them called poll clerk or I don't remember what they were called in the last federal election, actually. I don't think we had them in the last federal election because of COVID quarantine guidelines. They were trying to reduce the amount of people working as much as possible. So then there is somebody called a DRO, Deputy Returning Officer. And the deputy returning officer is the person who sits at the table with the actual legal ballots, and they have to put their signature on them. So in the provincial elections, I've never worked at a provincial election where there is no technology. I've only worked at stations that had technology. So I actually don't know what happens at a provincial election poll station that doesn't have electronic technology running it, and it's all manual. I don't know what happens there, but I do know that when you are at an Ontario station with technical equipment, the ballots are basically a letter-sized page almost, or a little bit bigger than that. And it's black and white and has all of the candidates printed on it in an arbitrary order, but the order is the same on every single ballot. And then you'll see at the top right corner of the ballot, there is a signature on it. There's a little initial. And that is the initial of the deputy returning officer who gave you that ballot. So they are the ones who, the terminology we use, the words we use are, they issued you that ballot. The terminology we use is that they issued you that ballot. They are the ones who gave you, and in doing so, they made it a legal ballot and they made it a valid ballot. A usable ballot. And this is in contrast to, let's say you or some jackanape came in with a ballot that looked identical. And they wanted to cast that ballot. It's not a real ballot, but they made it. But there's no signature on it. Let's say they put their signature on it, but their signature is not recognizable as the initials of any one of the deputy returning officers at that poll station. And so if there is to be a recount, or not even if there is to be a recount, the person who's receiving the ballot, like they're called a tabulator in the provincial elections, to put it in the counting machine, they'll know. They'll be like, I haven't seen the signature all day long. I know that's not what the signature is. That's not a real signature. Who did you get this from? And then they're going to have to point, I got it from this person, whatever. And yeah, that's not their signature. So at different stages, there are checks and balances to make sure that everything is actually truly correct. It is like, if we truly care that this is done correctly, we have to, when we work at these stations, we have to give a crap. We have to care. You have to care. When you look at your ballot, you have to care. When You get your ballot. You have to care. When you see people come in and do things, you have to care and say something to us. Like, the reason that elections get fraud is because people don't care. It's not really that some random wild thing comes out of the trees and breaks rules and breaks laws. It's one of our own community who chooses to act contrary to our own rules. So you have to care. You have to talk to your neighbors. This is entirely a community issue. You have to give a crap. So then you put your ballot in a box and you stroll on out. The other person that you might see is the central poll supervisor, which I mentioned before. And then that's that. That's all done. At a provincial election, the central poll supervisor is called an SDRO, which is supervising deputy returning officer. And then there are information officers. And then I mentioned there is a tabulator person. They're called tabulating deputy returning officer. And they're the person who takes your ballot from you. If you have ever voted in an Ontario election with machines, you will remember that person who took your ballot from you and put it into the machine and said, yep, you're all good to go. That's them. Okay, next things. How do we keep the vote secure, accurate, legal? When you come in, you're always asked for ID. And while we hear these things in America of like that it disenfranchises, it prevents people from being able to vote by requiring them to have a legal government ID, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. True. But the contrary to that is because our laws say only citizens can vote, we need to be able to determine whether or not someone is actually a citizen. And I'm of the personal belief that voting should be allowed for people who are also residents. But then the question still remains, how do you prove that someone coming to vote is a resident and not a foreign agent from across the pond from a nation that dislikes us and has sent somebody this past weekend to come vote? And then they're going to be gone at the end of the evening. Like, to be able to separate those people, there needs to be identification. But to the voters' benefit, the kind of identification we need is a lot more lenient than I think America needs. I think America, depending on the state or whatever, it's really strict and some people just cannot vote. Also, there's that whole nonsense thing of if you're not registered to vote, you're going to have a problem, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you're registered to vote by a certain date or whatever if you want to be able to vote. Here, we do not have that. Here, you need, I do not remember the actual IDs. There's always a list. When we work the polling stations, we are given a manual on what our position needs to do. But at the back of every single one of our manuals, we have a list. Here's what we can accept from you. And it is a huge list. So it's the typical ones: driver's license, a birth certificate, a passport. We can accept your health card if you choose to give it to us. We can't ask you for it, but if you pull it out and say, do you guys accept health card? Then we're allowed to say yes. And the reason for that is because of health laws, privacy laws and all that. We can't legally suggest you give it to us. But on top of that, we don't really need to prove your face is who you say you are. And the reason for that truly is if this person has your ID and can completely prove that they're you, you have a bigger problem than your vote in the election. And really, nothing is perfect. Nothing can ever be perfect. This is about as much as we can do. Plus, somebody could give you a fake ID with a fake picture on it. Like, what are you going to do then? But. So, we can accept things like mail. We can accept things like bills, phone bills, utility bills. We can accept things like proof of employment, employment letters, and offers that have your address on it with your name on it. Basically, whatever you bring us has to prove you are the name you say you are, and you live at the address that you claim you live at. That's really the biggest thing that we need, because you're allowed to vote in the place you've come to vote if you live at a certain, so where you get to vote is related to where your home address is, where you live, because you're voting for your representative. We don't vote for prime ministers in this country. You vote for your representative of your riding, and different representatives belong to different parties. And whoever gets elected gets to sit in parliament. That's it's like a game of musical chairs, and whoever wins gets to sit in the chair. So you have to vote for your representative in your region where you live, because whoever you vote for represents that address area, that region of land. If you come to my polling station and you don't live anywhere near me, and you're coming to vote, you're voting for a candidate who's going to represent me, but not you. That's why you can't just vote at any station. That's why that's happening. So we ask you for those. You can give us a million different pieces of ID, but we just need to prove your name and your address. The federal election is a little bit more particular in what you give us. When they give us the info, assuming I get to work. I hope I get to work. But just in general, if you ever want to know what kind of ID ahead of time that you can bring in, it's on Elections Canada website. It's just elections.ca. That's it. And anytime there's a provincial election, it's elections.on.ca for Ontario, specifically provincial, Doug Forty kind of election, that thing. That's a different website. So that's the ID scenario. We also make sure amongst ourselves when we work at the polling station that everyone is following the rules. So the supervisor, whether it is a central poll supervisor for federal or a what's the word I'm looking for? A supervising deputy returning officer, SDRO, for provincial. I'm going to use the acronyms because it's easier to say. Federal leader person is CPS. Provincial election leader person is SDRO. Now that we've established that. The CPS person looks at what everyone's doing, make sure that they are following the rules, and will step in and out for each of these roles whenever they need to take a break. Same thing is true for the SDRO, except that we didn't need to do something like that when I did my, the past election that I worked at, the past provincial election, because we had so many people at our station that we could afford to just give two people a break and kind of balance it out as need be. So at the federal level of elections, there's a bunch of checks and balances that keeps the vote secure. When we get all the material and it comes to the polling station, you might be thinking, well, the person who transports it could tamper with it, could mess with it. You would be right. However, it is never one person alone working at a polling station. So if they do tamper with that material and it comes to the polling station, the rest of us are going to see that it's being tampered with. The rest of us are going to see something's wrong. So if they marked off all the ballots for the candidate that they wanted, well, we're going to see that. If I'm a deputy returning officer, if I'm a DRO, which is below the supervisor, and I get my ballots, and my ballots all have X's on them for people already, I'm going to say, these are marked ballots. They've been tampered with. We cannot hand these out to people. And if they say, do what you're told, there's no authority like that, do what you're told, because every one of us gets what is called the returning office. We get the phone number for the returning office. We have that in our training. And the returning office, note that the words returning office, returning officer, I've been saying that. The person who is in charge of the election events in a riding, which is a boundary that was drawn out on a map. And everyone who's in that riding gets one candidate. And everyone who's in that riding gets in one candidate. That's how it's spread out. every riding gets its own returning officer. And the returning officer for that riding is going to have a problem if someone calls in and says, hey, all the ballots have been marked off and we haven't even opened the poll yet. So we're given their phone number. That's who trains us. Every single election official, the returning office and their staff trains us. If we have problems, like somebody's tampered with the materials while bringing them to the poll station, we will say to the returning office, any one of us are allowed to at any point in time call the returning office and say, the material has been tampered with. We cannot open the polling station. This needs to be resolved. And they will send staff. And they have their protocols for how to take those ballots and say that they're incorrect and lock them up in a box and everything, and then give us brand new ballots. The other thing that we have is, so to clarify, the fact that there are multiple people at every polling station alone is the first check and balance, that we can check one another and we can call one another out. And it's not like we have to follow somebody's orders if they're breaking the law. We have to call the returning office and tell them, no, they're breaking the law. They're just outright here forcing us to break the law. I disagree with this. I refuse to do what I need to do. The other thing is, once we're setting up, we are all looking in these boxes, especially the federal election. The ballot box where people drop their marked vote in, like their ballot in, it comes open. And you might feel like that feels weird, but no, it's a good thing that it comes open. It comes brand new open and we have to assemble it because we get to see if there's anything inside of it before we set up for the day. And that's to see that nobody at the returning office has tampered with it. So when we set up the box, we set it up, 2 witnesses look inside the box and say, yes, I see that it is empty. I see that it is correct. I see that it is clear. Another person can choose. Another election poll worker can choose to come over and say, I also want to see inside the box that it's fine. And they're allowed to come over and see that the box is fine. And so everybody is allowed to see that the box is fine. And then it's closed. And there are seals that we put and sign. And this allows us to know this box is secure. If those seals are cut, we will know. If those seals are struck off or scribbled on or tampered with, we will know. If those seals do not have the signatures we saw got put on the box in the morning, we will know. We will know something has gone wrong, and we have to call the returning office and pause voting at the station. If something severe like that has happened and something's been tampered with, notably like that, we have to stop. We have to alert the returning office because that is severe voter fraud. So again, like I said, you have to care. If we want to prevent something like this, you have to care. You have to give a crap. If you are applying to vote in the election, I am telling you this right now. I have worked with many people now. You have to give a crap. This is our democracy. You have to care. So another way that we keep everything secure, everyone's gone behind the voting screens when they vote. Some people don't want to respect the voting screens. Some people don't know that the voting screens are there. Some people have a bit of a blindness and just don't see the voting screen that a whole other person is behind. I am begging you, look up for 2 seconds and be aware of the people around you. I'm begging you, please, because you cannot pass behind people at a voting screen, which is something that we had to prevent people from doing in many different elections. And we had to physically with our body go over and be like, no, please, you need to walk around the outside of the table. You can't walk behind people. It's surprising how many times you have to stop somebody from accidentally going around the back of a voting screen. And this is not to say you can see this happening. If you go to your voting station and you take a look, you'll see this happening. And it's not like we're doing these are your neighbors. You can tell them. Also, if somebody's walking behind you or coming to walk behind you and we haven't noticed them, you can flat out tell them, please don't walk behind me. I'm telling you, tell your neighbors, just don't walk behind me. Tell us and be like, somebody walks behind me. Somebody's coming up behind me. Speak up, speak out, speak up. You have the right for your vote to be utterly private and utterly yours. The other thing is people bring their spouses behind the voting machine, People bring their spouses behind the voting screens and insist on taking their spouses behind the voting screens. And sometimes you can see that the other spouse is agreeable to it. And they're asking you, like, please, it's fine. I'll help them. We put you guys through a lot of paperwork and you get annoyed with us. But I promise you it is for a good reason. Anytime you are translating for your parents who may not speak English, or you are assisting your spouse who might have a disability, or your parent who might have a disability, or your child who might have a disability, anytime you are insisting that somebody comes with you behind the voting screen, we make you sign a form. We make you sign that you say yes to this, and we make them sign that they say yes to this. We have you read an oath that says you promise solemnly to uphold their privacy and their democracy and not to intimidate their vote or to reveal their vote to anybody. And the reason we make you do that, a lot of you people who hear this, I'm not saying that you people like in a mean way, but a lot of you out there who have experienced this with us get annoyed because you're like, oh my God, it's my parents. Like, it's not like I'm a random criminal. It's not like I'm some big bad wolf or something. But the reason we do that more than anything else, the reason why that has to happen and has to be on record is because spouses intimidate spouses. It's because people are abused, and you would be surprised how many people out there suffer from abuse regularly. So the reason we do this is so that it is on record. You were behind that screen with them. If they later complain and say, no, I didn't want to vote for that, but I voted for this instead because my wife told me, or this person told me, or that person told me, or made me, we know who made them. They can be prosecuted because it's really serious to force someone's vote. So we do this so that it is on record. You may not be the person who's going to abuse your relative or whoever it is you're caretaking and force their vote, but there will be someone who attempts it. And I actually can think of one particular occasion at one election. They did not get their way, but they were adamant that they must go behind the screen with their wife. And their wife was like, it's fine. I can do it. I'll figure it out. I'm fine. And he was so persistent and verbally aggressive about it to her that eventually she just caved and went, or it's fine. He can come. He can come behind. It'll be okay. It's fine. And we straight up said to him, you need to sit over there. Her vote's private. Your vote's private. You need to sit down over there. She has enough language skills to do it. She said she will be able to do it. She says she knows who she wants to vote for. You need to sit over there. Because there are people who are going to do that, who are going to check that you're voting for who I want you to vote for. That's not allowed. So we also make sure that that's not happening. That's why we're so strict with it. Lastly, I think the big major one that people might wonder about is the counting of the vote. When we open that box at the end of the night to count, there have to be multiple people present. So it's the deputy returning officer who handed out the ballots. And it is either the supervisor and like one other person. So could be an information officer or a registration person or whichever, another poll employee. And we cut open with a scissors or with a pen or something. Not really with a pen because we don't want to mark the box. So like with a scissors or a key or whatever, we cut open the seals. I know you're like, oh my God, you cut open the ballot box? Yes, we cut open the ballot box right there with multiple people witnessing it. The only human being who is allowed to touch those ballots, and this is, again, I'm saying this at a polling station that doesn't have technology. The only person who is allowed to touch those ballots is the person who issued them. So that there is exactly one human being who has touched those ballots. So if something has gone wrong, there is only one human being that can be prosecuted. There's only one human being they need to track down. The more people who touch that ballot box, the more people who touch those ballots, the more uncertainty and liability that's introduced if there has to be something legally done. So cut open that box, and the only person allowed to touch the ballots is the person whose signature is on those ballots. They take them out. They set up their envelopes. Well, they set up their envelopes beforehand, but they take them out and then they open them. And now you might go, oh my God, my vote's private. Yeah, your vote's private. At the end of the night, I don't know who voted for who. At the end of the night, I'm opening a ballot with a random pencil mark on it or pen mark on it. I don't know who that is for. I don't know who voted for who. I don't know whose vote that was. I just know what it says. And that's the point. So I'll open it up. I'll look at it. And I'll declare that ballot for whichever candidate was voted for. So let's say the NDP candidate on that ballot was selected. Let's call them John Smith, generic name. John Smith of the NDP party is who this ballot is for. And I declare it. You might say, well, I could say anything. Correct. Which is why I can't just declare it. I have to open the ballot, say who it's for, turn it around, and show it to the witnesses. People are allowed to object. That objection has to be written down in the poll record that one candidate was declared, one ballot was declared for John Smith of the NDP, and so-and-so objected to that claim. Now, that doesn't mean that you change the claim. It still gets put in the envelope where you declare it. Like, you can choose to accept their objection, like take a look at the ballot and be like, oh no, that's a stain or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's actually this candidate, and I choose to accept it. But you, the DRO who's counting it, you get the final say. And you put it in the envelope that for whichever candidate it's for. The reason you write down the objection is because if there is a huge margin that somebody won by, they're probably not going to do a recount. But if there is a really close distance between two candidates, and the candidate's like, no, I want a recount. Or in general, if it's within a certain margin, I think they have to do a recount. They will recount the ballots for those people, and they will reopen those envelopes and look at the ballots that were declared and see and make sure everything truly was declared for correctly. And usually the candidate or their representative is present for that recount. And they know ahead of time what to look for if you have written it down somewhere. So-and-so objected to so many different ballots for so many different candidates, blah, 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 blah. And then they know what to look for. They know which ballots were contentious. So there's that. There are seals, stickers that go on everything. They have signatures that go on these sticker seals. You have to sign them yourself. Democracy is just paperwork, an obsessive amount of paperwork and signing and stickers and records and keeping track of everything and writing it down. I mentioned earlier when we got up to get food and eat, we had to sign in and out in the poll book and say that we were leaving. Yeah, we had to say that we were leaving our station at whatever time to whatever time, because let's say that something was assigned and somebody did come in. Well, where was that DRO? Well, it's in the poll book. They were gone. So who did this? Well, who had signed into their station? Oh, it was the supervisor. Oh, so the supervisor is liable from this time to this time. That's why we have to do that. We are not allowed to leave the polling station. Not even to get food. Not like the only time we are allowed to leave is an emergency, and we're not allowed to return. So we have to sign out, leave for the emergency. The supervisor has to call the returning office and ask them to send somebody to replace them. And they do have standby people who are waiting around, waiting in the wings on election days to get that call. And then they send that person in, and then they will replace whoever had to leave. Other than that, we're not allowed to leave the physical grounds of the polling station. And that's really mainly because, well, what if we go somewhere and get a ballot and bring it back? What if we go somewhere and bribe someone and come back? What if we saw a voter and they voted for somebody and we were unhappy for whatever reason with them, and we follow them out and we go harass them or something. But mainly also, the reason we're not allowed to leave the polling station is because what if we get hurt? What if we get injured? Somebody got into a car crash when they left the polling station at one point. They didn't say anything, and they left the polling station, and they got into a car crash. They were fine. This is a story I heard from a fellow poll worker. They were fine, but like they had to be replaced because then they were in a car crash. There's a liability. They have to handle that now. They can't return to their job. So it's also so that you are accounted for exactly where you say you're going to be. So that's really the security of the vote. That's like the major points I think I wanted to get into. And these are important things. Oh, I remember one more thing I wanted to talk about. Being eligible to vote and registering to vote. You have to be 18 years old. You have to be a citizen of the country. You have to be living in the riding that you're going to the polling station for. You have to have some sort of eligible ID that you can prove your name and your address. But on top of that, many times people will hear, go register to vote, register to vote. And it's a common thing that we hear mainly on the American side of stuff, because I believe in America it's a bit different where if you're not registered to vote by voting day, in some places you just can't vote. And that is not the case at all in Canada or Ontario, anywhere. I can't speak for other provinces because I don't know what they do, but I'm pretty sure it's the same thing because of our rights here. Even if you do not register to vote online, do not wake up on election day thinking, oh, it's too late for me, I can't. The election polling station is open for 12 hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., your local time. And if you show up with ID that proves your name and address and demonstrates you are who you are, you can vote. It doesn't matter if it's the very first time you have voted. It doesn't matter if you have voted before and you moved addresses. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you come to the polling station and prove your name and current address. And we will register you right there. And you can vote right there. Do not stay at home because you think something will prevent you. Oh, I didn't do this. Oh, I didn't register. Oh, I don't know if I have the right ID. Oh, I don't have a driver's license. Come to the station. I don't care. None of us care. We have, again, I said democracy is just filing. It's just paperwork. We have a stack, an oppressively tall stack of paper for different reasons. We have paper to register people, like forms. We have forms to register people. We have forms to change addresses. We have forms to declare that you definitely didn't vote, because maybe we come in and we look at the poll book and the record of people, and it says that you voted already at an advanced poll and you didn't. And maybe there's an error. Like, there's always clerical error can happen. And you're attesting, no, I didn't vote. I promise you I didn't vote. I didn't mail in a vote. I didn't vote. I don't know where that came from. Well, you sign a document that has your name on it, your signature on it, that says, nope, I swear this current vote is my vote that I'm voting right now. We have a document for that. We have a document for, let's say, this is at the federal level. I'm pretty sure at the provincial level, there's variations of this, but I've never really had to use it, because at the provincial level, the kind of ID that's accepted is, like, there's way more types of ID that are accepted at the provincial level. So we've never had to have somebody say, I can't prove who I say I am. But for the federal election, because it's much more strict, I think there's less things that we can accept. However, let's say you do come in and you don't have anything on you. You've never had a piece of ID, really. You don't get mail. Mainly it's people who are elderly who this has happened with. But let's say your neighbor knows who you are. Your neighbor can vote. Your neighbor knows who you are and vouches, yep, this is a real human citizen. They are here. They do live here. They are who they say they are. I know them. You can absolutely still vote. And what you'd have to do is the person who swears you are who you are will sign a declaration that vouches that you say who you are. It'll have their name on it, that they're the ones who declared yes. And then it'll have your name on it, that they're declaring you are who you say you are. And then you get to vote. And that goes in a folder that we keep all of these things at the end of the night. So, I mean, come vote. There have been so many provisions made to, as best as possible, not prevent people from voting. If you don't speak English, come vote. Translators. We have translators. There is a phone line to call where people will say things in your language for you. You are allowed to vote in English and French. Like that is the standard minimum. But if you speak a different language, go vote with that different language. It's fine. We as the poll workers, we are allowed to help you. If you need help, we're allowed to help you. We don't have to sign things. But because we have signed separately a declaration that says we will not break the secrecy of the vote. We will not harass people. Like, we are held to a higher standard even than the electors who come in and say, I promise I am who I am, and I promise they're who they say they are. Like, we are held to a legal standard. We can be very severely prosecuted if we don't follow those rules. I have seen who people have voted for before. Like, I can't divulge who voted for what, and to be fair, I don't really remember. But I have seen, by way of them showing me, by way of me having to help, by way of accident, I have seen who people have voted for before. I've recognized ballots, and I have to keep that completely within my brain and never act upon it and never say it. And I must basically put myself to forget it, which is, to be fair, I have. It's really hard. If you don't recognize somebody and you don't know somebody, you don't really remember. Like, it doesn't matter to you anymore. So that is the basis of voting. It's coming up. It needs to happen. You guys need to vote. Attention all passengers, we interrupt your regularly scheduled podcast for a special announcement. It's time for the Word of the Week. Literacy is atrocious these days for reasons that are kind of outside of our control at this point, and why not do my part to help by providing you with a lovely new word to learn if you have not heard it before. They're not big words. They are big words. I can't talk. But this week's word is epistemicide. And epistemicide is spelled E-P-I-S-T-E-M-I-C-I-D-E. Epistemicide. And the University of Syracuse has a study that defines it as the killing, silencing, annihilation, or devaluing of a knowledge system. That's right, it's the death of knowledge. It is the killing, the genocide of a knowledge system. An example sentence of epistemicide would be, when the American government websites started deleting large groups of information and history regarding American past issues, people, and policies, they were engaging in the first steps of epistemicide. Epistemicide. And now back to your regularly scheduled programming. I want to close out with a story. I mean, like, this one was just me yelling into the microphone about how voting works, which is something I feel very strongly about. But I want to close out with a story that I know some people are waiting to hear as well. And it is a story concerning this past election, this past provincial election that I worked at. So this past provincial election, I was a different role than I've been before. The past other elections, I'd been a DRO, which is the person who issues the ballots and makes sure, like, I strike you off the list. Here's your ballot. Go vote. Put it in the box. Goodbye. That was me. That was me all day. But this past election, I was SDRO. I was one of the supervisors for the polling station I was at, and there were two of us because it was a big polling station. And one of the responsibilities of the supervisor of the polling station, which is different from everybody else, is you have to bring the materials from the returning office to the election station, and then you have to bring them back. So my co-supervisor brought them from the returning office to the election station, which I'm grateful for. I had to bring something too. I mean, they've forgotten to give her something, so I had to also go back and get something from them, which was fun. We get paid for it. You are on the clock because you are working. It's part of your duties. And then we help set up, blah, 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 blah. It was a hard job. It's about 14 hours of work straight because you set up from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Then the polls are open for 12 hours from 9 to 9. And then packing up, counting the ballots, or in our case, it was a machine that counted them. So it was packing up the equipment, signing. Democracy is filing. Signing all of that paperwork and making sure it's accurate, making sure we've signed everything correctly, making sure we've put all the numbers down correctly, making sure we've done it all in the right order, putting it all in the right envelopes, putting the envelopes in the right bags because there are multiple bags, sealing everything correctly, labeling everything correctly, putting it all in the right spots, collecting all the materials together in the right way. That takes an hour. And cleaning up, we have to take down all of the signage from wherever we're at because polling stations kind of are like pop-up locations. They don't happen in designated spots that are always polling locations. They just happen in spots that typically end up becoming polling stations, like high schools or community centers, where we kind of commandeer a space for a while and become the polling station. And then when we're gone, we have to go like with no trace. We have to vanish. So that takes 14 hours, and it is hard mental work. It's not really physical work. You're not lifting and carrying stuff all day long. You are on your feet for a long time. You can sit, but you're also on your feet for a long time. And it's just hard mental work because I don't know if anyone's ever tried to keep track of something for 14 hours straight, really intensively. It's really difficult. It tires you out really, really, really badly. That's why we get so many breaks. You get like a lunch break, a dinner break. You could also probably take a little like 5-minuter if you need to. It's hard, but it's fun. And I've always loved doing it. I've worked at every single election since the last one that I was eligible to vote in. Or since the first one I was eligible to vote in, I mean. The first one, when I turned 18, I voted. I was in Ottawa at the university, and so I voted there because that's where I was. That was where my address was at that time. And so I voted there. Also because I was going to live there several years in a row. So I was like, I'm voting here because what happens here matters to me. And I didn't work for that one because I didn't know I could. And then years later, I worked for the next one. And then the next one and the next one. I don't think I worked for the federal one or something like that. But then I did work for the next one. And I've worked for them ever since. And it's fun. It's always fun. However, this past election that I worked tired me so much because being a supervisor for 14 hours is a really, really, really big mental drain. And it was a big polling station. And we were not this was unlike the other elections where it had been smooth sailing and nothing had happened. Because it was a big polling station, there is always room for mistakes. And there were like many different minor incidents. Again, everything gets resolved. Nothing's a problem. But you have to write it down. Anything that happens that's weird. Somebody comes in yelling, vote for somebody or whatever, and then leaves screaming. You have to write it down that it happened and what time. It's just paperwork. And the drag of putting myself to do that paperwork was a lot. And I'm not complaining. I was happy to do it. I like doing paperwork. But it comes with a trade-off. The trade-off is you're extremely tired at the end of the day. And because the supervisor had brought the materials, the other supervisor had brought the materials, we agreed it's only fair. She brought the materials to the polling station. I would bring the materials back from the polling station to the returning office and do the check-in and everything. So I did. And I'm skipping ahead out of this election cycle and what happened because I think I'm not legally allowed to say what the incidents were. At least I'm not legally allowed to say it for, I don't know, probably like 10 years from now or something like that. So I'm not gonna. suffice to say, figure out what you think the incidents were based on the things I have mentioned so far. But this past election, there were a handful of things that were minor. They happened, whatever. And then the election night was over and we packed up and that was that. And then I had to bring everything back. It is so heavy. And the thing is, you would think it's not. Because when people bring everything the first time around, it doesn't feel heavy. It comes in all these different containers. But no, it's heavy. And it's because one of the biggest things is where the ballots are located changes. And so bags that were not heavy become very heavy. I think that's my biggest complaint. Like if someone from a returning office or from anywhere in elections, Ontario or Canada, ends up hearing this podcast, or someone who cares and could change it hears this podcast, you guys need to figure out a different way of transporting these materials at the end of the night. Because the biggest change of weight that happens is the ballots go from being in the box where they're empty and they're in plastic packages to going in the poll bag, which is a giant bag that has all of the election materials. And it's, excuse my language again, it's fucking heavy. It is pounds and pounds of paper. And it all has to be locked up in a very specific bag and sealed off. It's like a plasticky kind of vinyl thing. And then that goes in this giant duffel bag thing. And it's heavy. It's so heavy. And I understand it's because of all the checks and balances. But you guys need to give us a bigger bag. Or give us a box. Give us this giant cart-looking thing that is durable enough to take that heaviness, because we have to lift these into our trunks at the end of the night. And yes, I know you say you have to be able to lift 40 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever. That's not 40 pounds. I'll tell you right now, that's more like 70 pounds. I know what 70 pounds feels like. I have lifted a cabbage bag before. That is close to 70 pounds. It's like 70 pounds, especially if it's a big polling station. You guys need multiple poll bags or something. There has to be more seals. If you want it to be secure, you need seals. You need things to be signed, so that we're not lifting this in giant bag. And by the way, the bag's not big enough. The bag that has to fit the envelopes full of ballots are not big enough to put all the envelopes full of ballots. You put them and you're stuffing them into this vinyl bag thing, trying not to tear it. And then you have to seal it with the sticky that comes with it. And it doesn't seal. It doesn't want to seal. It's not able to close. I've witnessed at another polling station, someone had to try and bring it back. And the bag was almost opening because they couldn't fit everything in it. It was that bad. You guys need to make a bigger poll bag. That's all I'm saying. You have to make a bigger poll bag. The vinyl thing. And it's heavy. So we put everything into these poll bags, got them in the car, and drove all the way. Like I live like 20, 25 minutes from the returning office. My chair is creaky. So we got there. I thought that would be the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. I got into the returning office, which this year was in a mall, and like in a empty commercial space in a mall. They had set it up. And I went there, and my God, I have never seen so much chaos in one life. Oh my gosh. So you come up to this thing, you have all your materials. There's these people at the front who help you bring them in from your car if you're weak. And to be fair, after 14 hours of work and tiredness, you are weak. I'm also 5'3". So like, yeah, I can lift things, but man, at the end of the night, no, I can't. So they get you inside, whatever, you've got all your stuff with you, and you're standing there. Waiting. I've never been to check-in before. This is the first time because it's the first time I've been a supervisor. And I didn't know what happens at the end of the night. I would like see the materials leave with the supervisor and be like, goodbye, my liability's done. And this time it wasn't. This time you stand there, they have a checklist and they give it to you and they tell you go to that station there. And the way they had set it up was there's a bunch of different stations with numbers, and each one is its own, the same thing. They're taking care of, where's my chair so creepy? They're taking care of every single supervisor. So every station takes on its own supervisor. And goes through their materials and makes sure that they've got everything. So you go up to this person, you're like, here's all my stuff. And they take them from you piece by piece. They're like, okay. So for Ontario elections, it was electronic equipment. So they're like, where are all the electronic poll books, little laptops? They took those and they put them in a separate spot where they were taking all back the poll books and checking them in. And there's a person over there who's checking, this is from poll station number, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. And they check it off on the list. And in front of me, they check it off on the list. And it's like this bunch of checks and balances, happening at the returning office. And then they take out, they open the giant poll accessories bag, the big cloth bag that I'm talking about, which thankfully has wheels. But guys, come on, please. I'm begging you, make something better. They put it down on the desk and they open it up and they take out poll station bag, like the poll bag itself, which is, again, the vinyl thing I was talking about. And they check that in. That's all the ballots. They're like, that's here, that's in it. And they're going through the list and they ask you, like, where is this? It's in here. Where is this? It's in here. Where is this? It's in here. And then they check off if you've done it right as you're doing it. Like, yep, that's in there. Great. Check. That's in there. Great. Check. That's in there. Great. Cool. And then they collect these things from you and they set them down on different spots that are labeled. Like, this is for this. This is for that. This is for this. This is for that. And then there's people, busy bees, behind the desks, taking those things and putting them, like, slotting them and organizing them into where they need to go, because they're all going to be delivered to different locales and places and offices and kept in different places and locked up in different places, because these are now materials that need to be stored and archived. So they're collected in a very specific way, in a very specific manner and pattern, so that everything can be done. Then they take these things from us and you're checking them off and you're exhausted. At this point, you're like, please finish up. And then they handled it. And they take the bag from you. And people are so tired at the end of this night that they're taking shit and throwing it. Like, and I'm not talking about the elections, like the filing stuff, but like the empty bag. This guy just came and flung it when it was done. He was like, duffel bag, empty, whoop, done. He just like launched it across the room. And there was a bunch of like election sign stuff or whatever that I had brought back that was completely unimportant. Oh, I remember what it was. The little ID card things that people get in the mail that the returning office can shred them if you want. They had a spot for him. He just literally threw it, and it was this giant bin full of them. He just, and they were gone. And because everyone's tired at the end of this night. Like, everyone just wants to go home, figure it out, finish up, and leave. So they're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. And the thing is, I was done at like 11 or something. They're not done until midnight. No, I'm lying. Was I done at 11? I was done at 11:15 or something like that. And then they were going to be there well past midnight. Like, I called ahead and they said, yeah, we're going to be here well past midnight. Don't worry about it. And it's because they now have to sort. They now have to pack. They now have to do their own things, which I imagine have seals that they have to sign as well. And they have to drive this material to God knows where and store it. And they have to take down the returning office after a certain point too. I think the returning office stays there for like a couple weeks after in case of recounts and stuff like that, and then they're gone. They also have to start setting up for what they're going to recount, whether somebody said, hey, this happened at my polling station, and it's severe enough that they have to keep that stuff to the side. Like, they have to figure out now, based on what they've got, what to do. And so I went home. And my story is this. I was so dog tired at the end of the night. When I stepped through the door at midnight, I was ready to fall over. I ordered some food. I ate some food because Lord knows I was exhausted and hungry. I hadn't eaten since like 6 or 7 at that point. Got undressed, got changed, was ready for bed, kind of just like plopped myself in the bed. Now, a little bit of lore about me. Backstory, real small. I have eczema, and it's stress-induced more than anything else. I mean, it's dry skin-induced. It is cold weather and hot weather-induced. It's induced by dust or irritants, but more than anything at all, my eczema is induced by stress. And good stress, bad stress, it doesn't matter. And in my case, it was a combination of good and bad stress. It was like tired stress more than it. Like my body was just stressed from being so tired. And so I'm like, okay, well, cool. I'm just going to go to bed. I'm done eating, whatever. I passed out into bed. I could not sleep. I did not sleep until 4 a.m. in that morning. Let me be real clear. I wanted to. I was so tired. I closed my eyes and could not fall into deep sleep. I fell into this half REM sleep where I was definitely not awake. I was definitely not asleep though. Because you know when you're half awake and you know what's going on in your room or you know what's going on around you, you can hear some stuff or whatever, but you're also dreaming. I was like that, where I was dreaming that I was dreaming the returning office, guys. I was dreaming that I was sleeping in my room and that the returning office was in my room. I tried so hard to fall asleep, and every 5 seconds, I was being woken up by returning office staff in my room asking me questions about poll stations I wasn't responsible for. Coming up and being like, "This is from poll station 35. This is from poll station 34. What happened with this thing? This material is over here and we can't find this." And I kept saying to them, guys, I'm from poll station number whatever. I'm not going to say it on like, I'm not actually going to say what my actual poll station number was, but I was like, I'm from poll station blah. I'm not responsible. I don't know what happened to these things. I don't know what happened. This is out of my hands. Go find the SDRO for poll station 34 or whoever you're asking. But like, why are you asking me? Let me sleep. And then I would close my eyes, go back to sleep. Close my eyes, go back to sleep. And 5 seconds later, I'd be awake again because somebody's waking me up, asking me about election material. The truth be told, though, this is not happening. I'm just asleep. Quotes, asleep in my bed, being woken up by my brain over and over and over again for 4 hours straight. That culminated in me tearing my skin off with my fingernails because I was so itchy because I had managed to get eczema from what was happening to me because I couldn't sleep and I was so exhausted and I was so stressed and my body was stressed from repeatedly waking up every 5 seconds. More like 5 minutes, but still waking up over and over and over again. And I woke up just clawing at my skin. And I have this vivid memory of saying out loud, you guys need to leave me alone. This is my bedroom and you can't be in here. I verbally said that out loud because I was so exasperated at that point. I couldn't function. And I actually had to convince myself as I was waking up, like, no, you're not in the returning office, and the returning office is not in your bedroom. The returning office is elsewhere. Your bedroom is empty. And then, my brain wasn't believing that. Like, my brain was like, no, but they are here. Like, I understand they shouldn't be here, but they are here. And I was telling my brain, mind you, my eyes are still closed, but I'm, like, kind of awake now. I have this, again, a vivid memory of saying out loud to myself, the returning office are not in your bedroom because they are not allowed to be in your bedroom. Not that they couldn't be inside my house. Not that they couldn't be in my bedroom because that's physically unlikely. Not because they would have had to climb through the windows and come into my bedroom. And not because my bedroom is way too small for the returning office to be in it. No. I had to convince myself that the returning office wasn't in my bedroom because they wouldn't have been allowed to be. And then I opened my eyes. And I looked around my room and I was like, I grounded myself. I'm like, I'm here. I am in my room. I am looking around. I'm here. I'm allowed to sleep. They're not here. And then I woke up, I washed my face a little bit, I put some lotion on, kind of calmed my eczema down, and went back to sleep. And then I finally woke up at like 2 p.m. the next day. Like 4 a.m. I was asleep, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down to 2 p.m. Daylight. And I woke up. Actually, I think it was later than that. I think it might have been 4. And I woke up and I was finally functional, but I was still like groggy, sleepy. And that's the end of that. Another thing that we have to do, like as a closing remark, is those of us who ran the polling station and were responsible for carrying the ballots and votes and whatever, we get a copy of the record of the ballot. At the provincial level, it is just the supervisors who get a record of the ballot. And at the federal level, it is the supervisor and the DRO who was assigning ballots. And the reason we keep a carbon copy of it is because in case there is a recount for your polling station, and there is a giant contest of whether or not you followed the rules or whether or not this is the record. First, I'm going to say, no, that's not the real record. That's a fake record or whatever, like when they do the recount. And a scrutineer or a candidate, scrutineer being like a representative for the candidate, claims that something's wrong and they want to check it, they will call you. If need be, they will call you and say, please present your carbon copy as your verification that this is in fact the record of the ballot. It has not happened to me. I hope it never happens to me, because that would mean that there was a really severe, there would be a really severe claim of fraud from a candidate for that. And either it would be that they're really acting up or that there really was something wrong. But we do get to keep it. And then we have to shred it after a fixed number of time. So... And it's not a record of who voted for what. It has no names on it. It's just the candidates in a list and how many votes they got for one another. But yeah, I guess that's it for the elections. Go out and vote, people, please. I cannot stress how important it is that you exercise your right to vote, not just because I could say your voice matters, your voice is important. I could say that. What I'm going to say instead of your voice is important, your voice matters, go and vote, I'm going to say 2 things. 1, for the past 10 years worth of elections, we have not had nearly half of all eligible people vote. That is to say, more than half of people who are allowed to vote do not. Every single election. And then all of us, we bitch and whine and complain about what happens around us. Trudeau did this. Harper did this. Doug did this. Pierre's going to do this. Like, so you want to bitch and whine and complain, but you don't want to vote? Is that really what I'm hearing from you? No, go vote. If you care so much to bitch and whine about it, and I don't want this happening, I don't want that happening. You know why it's happening? Because you didn't go and fucking vote. You didn't exercise your voice. If you go and exercise your voice, you think so strongly about it, go do that. I understand that some of us did vote and we're like, I voted and this is still happening. Yeah, but now your voice actually, you saying I voted and you chose to not do what you said you promised to do, that carries more weight than, you're not doing what I want you to do, but I didn't tell you that I want you to do it. Like, well then how are they supposed to know? How will they give you any stock then? So please, for the love of God, specifically young people, I know we all feel despondent and we go, what's that going to change? A lot. A lot, especially if we all, as young people, choose to stop going after this dichotomy of liberal conservative. Like if all the young people genuinely felt strongly about NDPs and independent candidates and we all voted for them instead, I promise you, you will not see the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party carry weight in Parliament because they will be in minorities. And on top of that, independents and NDPs could gladly make coalitions with one another. And they probably would. The point is not who's the party that sits in charge of everything. The point is who has the most seats. And if the most seats are held by people who aren't even from liberal or conservative parties, who, mind you, they tend to agree with one another, the NDPs and independents and so on, they tend to agree better with one another than the liberals and conservatives. You will have more done by people who more profoundly care. So please go and vote. Young people make up the biggest proportion of voters. We are the biggest demographic of voters because there are the most of us. So we do need to go and vote this election. That's number one. Number two, I could say your voice is important. Go out and vote. Make it count. I'm not going to say that. You are lucky you have the right to vote. And that hasn't really been made apparent to us until this past year. You are lucky. You specifically, women and people of color, are lucky you get the right to vote. And I'm saying this to women, white women too. You are lucky you have the right to vote, and you take it for granted. You think it is an inalienable right now that you get to vote, that no one can take that from you. In America, today, they are seconds away from taking that right from women, from white women, not just women of color or immigrants or what have you. They are seconds away from taking away women, white women's right to vote. After women murdered their husbands, poisoned husbands, burnt buildings, just to get that right to be a human being under the law who was completely legally equal and able to do everything that men can do. They fought hard for you to have the right to choose not to vote. You need to exercise that right this election to vote, not to not vote, because it has been proven very terrifyingly south of us that all it takes is the waving of a pen and a loophole in words to put you back in a kitchen under someone's foot. All it takes is saying your legal name at birth has to match your legal name on your driver's license today in order for you to vote. That's what they did in America and are about to do and pass in many states. And it means that women who are married and took their husbands' names can't vote. Point blank. It means that if you married and got children, you're happy, you've done what you're supposed to do, you can't vote. Your vote belongs to your husband. You belong to your husband. Now, we don't have that here. But the fact that a democratic nation could very easily become a not democratic nation, and that they are our closest neighbor, and that people here are far too giddy to start repeating what the fascists down south have been saying, means you should not throw out your vote this time. You should give a shit. But that's all for me this time. I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to me. Again, and thank you so much for voting. I will catch you next week, Wednesday. If you like what you hear on the podcast, tell someone you love about it. Or if you want to donate and support and keep this train rolling, you can visit ko-fi.com/retrospect station. That is ko-fi.com/retrospect station. And if you want to follow along and find out when the next episode is out and just other updates, whatever you want, you can check it out on Instagram and TikTok at retrospectstation.com. I keep saying .com, at Retrospect Station. And if you want to follow me instead and what I'm up to, I am Elizabeth Dean and I am at AstroAlex34 on Instagram and TikTok. And so I guess that's it for this week, huh? See you next time.
A special thanks to the Mississauga Library Makerspace and Hazel McCallion Library. Without their resources, this show would not be possible.